Could CalRecycle folks turn on their webcam? And then Kiri or Arlene, if you could stop sharing your screen while we do intros. Perfect. So it is 10:30, so let's get this started as we only have an hour. So welcome to the statewide local education agency webinar. My name is Ashley Yee, and I am CalRecycle's SB 1383 implementation manager. Please note, once we ensure ADA compliance, we will post this webinar and the talking points. There's a lot that our presenters will go through, so don't worry if you can't capture it all. We will be posting the PowerPoint and talking points once we ensure ADA compliance. So before I turn it over to Julia Doloff, who will go over logistics of the webinar, I want to introduce you all to who will be presenting and are available to respond to any questions. So CalRecycle folks, once I say your name, if you could just give a little wave. So from CalRecycle, we have Arlene Iwahiro and Kiri Canuella representing local assistants and the local education agencies. They also put together this webinar and will be presenting, so big thank you to them. We have Kara Morgan and Julia Doloff representing assistants, collections, the waivers, other portions of 1383, and a big thank you to Julia for handling the logistics of the webinar. It's a lot of behind the scenes work. We have Kyle Pogue, Tim Hall, Martine Boswell, and Alex Rosado representing edible food. We have Alan Ilazorio and Trisha Moore representing compliance and enforcement. And we have Kate Wilkins representing our waste characterization study. We also have Ray and Esmeralda who will help with our live Q&A portion. So we look forward to that. So big thank you for them, to them for volunteering. So now I'll turn it over to Julia to go over logistics.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So good morning, everyone. So after our presentation by Arlene and Kiri, we will have a live Q&A session. So please use the instructions that are shown on this slide during that session. If you're using the GoToWebinar platform and would like to ask a question, please type your question into the question pane. If you're watching the webinar via the Cal EPA broadcast, please email your questions to the SLCP inbox. Staff will unmute participants in the order that questions come in. Note that you will need to unmute yourself on your end when asked to by a CalRecycle staff member. And please remember to state your affiliation before asking your question. CalRecycle staff may be responding in writing to some questions in GoToWebinar. We will verbalize these written responses for everyone to hear. Questions and comments regarding the merit of the regulations were responded to during the rulemaking process. Therefore, today we will be focusing on questions or clarifications regarding implementation and tools. So with that, I will hand it over to Kiri and Arlene for their presentation.
We can't hear you, Kiri, or I can't hear you.
Thank you. So my name is Kiri Canuella, and I will be presenting today with my colleague, Arlene Iwahiro. We are both senior ES specialists with the Local Assistance and Market Development Branch. And this is an overview of what we will be covering today. In 2006, AB 32, California Global Warming Solutions Act, became the first comprehensive program of regulatory and market mechanisms to achieve real, quantifiable, cost-effective reductions of greenhouse gases. Many individuals monitor solid waste, including school district administrators concerned about increases in solid waste disposal costs, recycling conscious teachers and students, and city-county recycling coordinators working with local school districts. Other current laws include mandatory commercial recycling impacting schools that generate at least 4 cubic yards of municipal solid waste per week, mandatory commercial organics recycling impacting schools that generate 2 cubic yards of solid waste per week, that is 2 cubic yards of trash, recycling, and organics total. AB 827, collection container requirements impacting schools and areas where recycling and organics is generated. Schools must provide an appropriate container adjacent to the solid waste container to collect and divert recycling and organic waste. In September 2016, Governor Brown set methane emissions reduction targets for California, SB 1383, in a statewide effort to reduce emissions of short-lived climate pollutants by reducing organic waste disposal by 50% by 2020 and 75% by 2025. As part of California's larger strategy to combat climate change, Senate Bill 1383 established an edible food recovery goal where no less than 20% of currently disposed edible food must be recovered for human consumption by 2025. I would like to clarify that these goals are not for individual jurisdictions, local education agencies, or for individual food facilities. Rather, it is a statewide goal that Californians must collectively achieve. So why is this statewide goal so important? We need to address climate crisis now. Also, we see many examples of wasted food rather than feeding people that are hungry. Since COVID, the number of people that do not have enough food to eat has doubled. This is another reason these regulations are so critical. This law was designed to reduce the global warming super pollutants like methane, which is up to 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Recycling organic waste and recovering edible food is a fast track to combating climate change. It is critical that we address climate change now. Californians are resilient. We have to work together to achieve these goals, and CalRecycle is your partner.
Before I go over the local education agency and organic waste definitions, I'd like to point out a few things. Jurisdictions are required to provide education and outreach to all organic waste generators, including local education agencies located within the jurisdiction. Jurisdictions also need to determine if regulated businesses, including local education agencies, are subscribing to collection service or self-hauling. This is what jurisdictions are currently doing under AB 341 and AB 1826 and will continue to do so. Jurisdictions are to include in their capacity planning efforts all organic waste and edible food tonnage generated by mandated food donors. Jurisdictions are responsible for requiring haulers providing residential, commercial, or industrial organic waste collection services to generators within its boundaries to meet the requirements and standards of the regulations as a condition of approval of a contract, agreement, or other authorization to collect organic waste. This is in section 18988.1. So, if a local education agency is contracting with a hauler for its collection services for trash, recycling, or organics, then that hauler should be adhering to the regulatory requirements. So let's dive into SB 1383 for local education agencies. SB 1383 defines a local education agency as a school district, charter school, or county office of education that is not subject to the control of the city or county regulations related to solid waste. So examples include all public school sites and other facilities such as a district office, central kitchen, and maintenance and operation locations. Organic waste is defined as solid wastes containing material originated from living organisms and their metabolic waste products, including but not limited to food, green material, landscape and pruning waste, organic textiles and carpets, lumber, wood, paper products, printing and writing paper, manure, biosolids, digestate, and sledges.
The requirements for local education agencies related to organic waste are in Article 5. The requirements for these entities also connect with Article 3, such as what a local education agencies have to do for containers, which I will cover in a moment. So let's look at each of these organic waste recycling requirements. The first is the local education agency must either subscribe to collection service or self-haul organic waste. They may recycle their organic waste by subscribing to and complying with the requirements of an organic waste collection service that meets the requirements of Article 3. This ensures that local education agencies that generate organic waste are accountable for the organic waste they generate, and to allow CalRecycle to verify that they are recycling it. Local education agencies can have a 3, 2, or single unsegregated collection service, but the service must comply with the requirements in Article 3. If they have a single unsegregated collection service or use a 2-container system, then the material in the gray container must go to a high diversion organic waste processing facility. If that facility does not meet the performance requirements, then the local education agency has options. For example, the facility comes into compliance, or the material is taken to another high diversion organic waste processing facility, or the local education agency uses a 3-container collection service. Keep in mind that if the local education agency is subscribing to the jurisdiction's collection service, then the jurisdiction would be addressing this issue. If self-haul is practiced, it must be done in a manner that complies with the requirements of Article 7, Section 18988.3. If they self-haul part of their materials, they would need to subscribe to a service for the other organic waste materials. Next requirement, local education agencies need to provide containers for collection. Typically, the service provider will provide the external collection containers for trash, organics, and recycling, so the agency would focus on the internal containers. Like businesses in Section 18984.9, local education agencies need to provide internal containers for the collection of organic waste and non-organic recyclables in all areas where disposal containers are located, except restrooms. The internal container must have a body or lid that conforms with the container colors provided through the organic waste collection service provided by the jurisdiction, or must have container labels on new containers that comply with the labeling requirements in Section 18984.8. Local education agencies are not required to replace functional containers, including containers purchased prior to January 1, 2022, that do not comply with the requirement of this article prior to the end of the useful life of those containers, or prior to January 1, 2036, whichever comes first. Local education agencies must ensure new containers are properly labeled by placing labels on containers that include language or graphic images or both that indicate the primary materials accepted and the primary materials prohibited in that container, or providing containers with imprinted text or graphic images that indicate the primary materials accepted and the primary materials prohibited in that container. Labels shall clearly indicate primary items that are prohibited container contaminants for each container. Local education agencies may comply with this section by using model labeling available on the CalRecycle website. So to explain this further, here is an example. If the collection service is a 3-container system, then you would need to have a green, blue, and gray internal container, or the 3 internal containers need to be labeled appropriately. The container color and material specifications are intended to standardize the colors and minimum levels of acceptable materials for collection containers provided across the state. This standardized approach helps employees, visitors, and students know what container to use and ensure that the organic waste are transported to appropriate facilities for recovery. It is important to point out that if a local education agency does not generate any of the materials that would be collected in one type of container, then the entity does not have to provide that particular container in all areas where disposal containers are provided. Arlene will talk about de minimis waivers in the next slide. The next requirement, prohibit their employees from placing organic waste in a container not designated for organic waste. This makes them accountable for the organic waste handled by their employees by requiring the employees to safely reduce the disposal of organic waste. It also helps to minimize contamination and ensure that the maximum amount of organic waste is recovered. Next requirement, local education agencies must periodically inspect organic waste containers for contamination. And if the containers are contaminated, inform employees of the requirement to only use those containers for organic waste. It is important to ensure that employers are not putting organic waste in the trash container and are not contaminating the recycling and organics container. This ensures that local education agencies are accountable for the organic waste by maintaining awareness of the contents of their organic waste collection container, communicating to employees when containers are contaminated, and when needed, educating employees about the proper use of organic waste containers. The last requirement on this slide, provide information to employees and students on methods for the prevention of organic waste generation. Also, nothing prohibits a local education agency from preventing waste generation, managing organic waste on site, or using a community composting site. These are additional options available to prevent the creation of, as well as to recycle organic waste beyond subscribing to an organic waste collection service or self-hauling to a facility that processes the organic waste for recycling.
CalRecycle shall waive a local education agency's obligation to comply with some or all of the organic waste collection requirements if the local education agency provides documentation demonstrating that any of the following situations applies. If the local education agency generates a de minimis amount of material in the blue and/or green container, it can be issued a waiver. De minimis amounts are either of the following. Solid waste is 2 cubic yards or more, and organic waste is less than 20 gallons per week. Solid waste is less than 2 cubic yards, and organic waste is less than 10 gallons per week. For example, in a 3-container collection service, if there is no organic waste stream present, or the material that would go into the green container, then a green container collection service is not necessary. However, a blue recycling container collection service would still be needed to provide for the collection of other organic waste such as paper products and cardboard. If there is a de minimis waiver for the collection, then the associated internal container would not be necessary. In the previous example, if you have no material for the green container, such as in an office building that does not generate food or green waste, then the office building would not need to have internal containers for food. A space waiver may be granted for a local education agency if it provides documentation that a hauler, licensed architect, licensed engineer, or similarly qualified entity has determined there is inadequate space for separate organic waste containers. This waiver is only applicable in limited scenarios and should decrease in use over the years. There are few instances in which an existing waste collection space could not accommodate an additional organic waste recycling container if the existing containers were downsized. If a jurisdiction that a local education agency is located in is granted a waiver pursuant to Section 18984.12, then the local education agency will not have to comply with the requirements in Article 5. The local education agency will need to submit a request to CalRecycle. This was done because if jurisdictions in these areas do not have to comply with Article 3, then there will not be collection services available for a local education agency to utilize. We will be publishing on the CalRecycle website the jurisdiction and census tracts for unincorporated areas that meet the thresholds for a waiver. This will be published on our website after the 2020 census data is available. Local education agencies will be able to review this information to determine if they are in a jurisdiction or census tract that is waived. CalRecycle is developing instructions and will have guidance on the website for the local education agencies to request a waiver. We anticipate this information being available in the May or June timeframe, and we will hold a statewide webinar to explain the process. I would like to note that a school site may want to coordinate with the school district to determine if the entire school district is eligible or certain sites, and then determine if the school district will submit the waiver requests. This coordination can be helpful since it is the district that typically maintains the collection service for all the sites in the school district.
Let's now discuss the edible food recovery requirements. So what does edible food mean? It means food intended for human consumption. We also specify in the regulations that nothing requires that edible food be recovered if it does not meet the food safety requirements of the California Retail Food Code. So just because the food is intended for human consumption does not mean it is safe to recover. It must be intended for human consumption and also meet all of the food safety requirements that are specified in California's Retail Food Code. We also specified in the definition of edible food that it is not solid waste if it is recovered and not discarded. This is really important. This is material that is before the trash container. This is food and not waste. The photos on the left were taken from one of CalRecycle's waste prevention and rescue grant recipients. These are some of the recoveries that are happening in K through 12 schools and school kitchens. So showing contrast, the food on the left, the right, from an unsupervised open buffet line where customers serve themselves. Most county health departments would not allow that food to be donated.
There are two categories for mandated food donors, which is also known as commercial edible food generators. Tier 1 mandated food donors begin implementation January 1st, 2022. Tier 2 mandated food donors begin implementation January 1st, 2024. Local education agencies with an on-site food facility are commercial edible food generators and must recover the maximum amount of food of edible food starting January 1st, 2024. If they use a food service provider, then the food service provider has the requirements to help recover the excess edible food that it generates, and that begins January 1st, 2022.
The key requirements for commercial edible food generators is to arrange to have the maximum amount of their edible food that would otherwise be disposed be recovered for human consumption through a contract or written agreement, either with a food recovery organization or service that will collect their surplus edible food, or self-haul to a food recovery organization that will accept their edible food. Also, a local education agency is allowed to recover edible food and provide it to its employees and students. For example, many schools have sharing tables to redistribute the edible food to students. So let's talk about self-haul. We added this into the regulations based on the feedback from the California Association of Food Banks. It is very expensive for the organizations and services to recover this edible food. They are often dependent on philanthropic or government funding and grants, and many do not have sustainable funding. So it would help them if generators are self-hauling. However, self-hauling has to be included in that contract or written agreement. Under no circumstances should a commercial edible food generator self-haul edible food without permission from their food recovery organization or service. This is absolutely critical to protect them from donation dumping. There is also nothing in the regulation that prohibits a food recovery organization or service from charging a fee for the service that they are providing to the food donor. There are record-keeping requirements for mandated food donors and no reporting requirements. Keep in mind that each local education agency that has an on-site food facility will need to maintain its records on-site. Records can be maintained electronically or hard copy. So a school district might have an electronic system, so all of the records for each site can be maintained. Saving records electronically allows the site to have access to its records in the event that CalRecycle conducts an inspection. Records must be kept up regularly and must be maintained for 5 years. These record-keeping requirements include keeping the following: a list of each food recovery service or organization that collects or receives its edible food pursuant to a contract or written agreement. a copy of contracts or written agreements between the mandated food donor and a food recovery service or organization, a record of the following for each food recovery organization or service that the mandated food donor has a contract or written agreement with. Need the name, address, and contact information of the service or organization, the types of food that will be collected by or self-hauled to the service or organization, the established frequency that the food will be collected or self-hauled, and the quantity of food collected or self-hauled to a service or organization for food recovery. The quantity shall be measured in pounds recovered per month. To help mandated food donors to comply, CalRecycle with HF&H Consultants developed a model food recovery agreement. The tool is highly customizable and is intended to help mandated food donors comply. The regulations are silent on what needs to be included in the contract or written agreement. So although we provide this as a model and it is customizable, it does not have to be used, but it can be used.
Section 18996.7 covers the enforcement process for local education agencies. Enforcement applies to organic waste recycling and edible food requirements. Jurisdictions are not required to enforce local education agencies. CalRecycle will conduct enforcement. While the regulations become effective January 1st, 2022, the enforcement process is an escalating process, and the timelines are not triggered until a notice of violation, or NOV, is issued. CalRecycle will consider the totality of circumstances surrounding a local education's compliance prior to issuing a notice of violation. Once CalRecycle determines a local education agency is violating Article 5 or Article 10 and enforcement action is necessary, CalRecycle will implement the process outlined in the SB 1383 regulations. If the department finds that a local education agency has failed to meet the final deadline in a notice of violation issued, CalRecycle shall send a notice stating that it has placed the respondent on the organic waste recovery non-compliance inventory list listed on CalRecycle's website. CalRecycle may remove the respondent from the list upon a finding based on available evidence that the respondent is no longer in violation of this chapter. You can also refer to section 18997.4, Organic Waste Recovery Non-Compliance Inventory. The SB 1383 enforcement structure allows CalRecycle to focus on compliance assistance first and dedicate enforcement efforts to serious offenders. Regulations allow for flexibility and deadline extensions in some circumstances when there are extenuating circumstances causing compliance issues.
Visit our SLCP web pages for updates and requirements on SB 1383. The web page for local education agencies is not yet published, but is coming soon. CalRecycle developed and posted on our website SB 1383 compliant model labels, signage, and brochures for local education agencies to utilize. The signage is available in 3, 2, and single unsegregated collection service in English, Spanish, Mandarin, Punjabi, Russian, and Korean. The materials are designed to include the most widely acceptable and prohibited items. Each sign is fully customizable using Adobe Acrobat Pro. Users can add and delete the materials they collect in their program. We will continue to develop and share best management practices for local education agencies. To stay up to date, you can sign up for the SLCP and schools listserv or visit our schools web pages for updated tools and resources. Before we turn to audience questions, we wanted to share a brief update about CalRecycle's commercial generator-based edible food waste characterization study. I will turn it over to the study project manager to give you some more information.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kate Wilkins. I'm co-manager for the generator study. I wanted to let you know that this study is currently underway, and its overall goal is to help track progress towards established targets set forth by SB 1383 to achieve reductions in the level of the statewide disposal of organic waste with special requirements for edible food waste reduction. So our contractor is beginning to recruit businesses and organizations in selected industry groups to participate in the study. What do participating organizations have to do? They have to fill out a survey of their food waste management practices and allow the field team to take a 200-pound sample from both the trash and organics bins that are on site, as well as peek into the recycling bin to visually assess if there's any food waste in there. The team will be sorting the sample into 11 material categories, 8 food categories, and 3 non-food categories. Participating sites may receive a composition report of what was in their trash and organic samples after the study. So some of the industry groups we expect to be more difficult to recruit are listed on this slide. Those include K through 12 schools, full service, limited service restaurants, hotels, caterers, cafeterias. If you have any recommendations on sites or organizations in these groups that may be interested in participating and getting a composition report of their organics and trash bin, please let us know. You can email us at the address on this slide. That's wastechar@calrecycle.ca.gov, spelled WASTECHAR @calrecycle.ca.gov. If you have any suggestions or any questions about the study, and I'll turn it back. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you so much, Kate, Curie, and Arlene. So this is just a quick reminder to please use the instructions shown on the slide for the Q&A session. Please type in your question into the question pane if you're using GoToWebinar. If you're listening via the Cal EPA broadcast, please email your question to the SLCP inbox. Just a quick reminder that if we have already responded to your question in writing via the GoToWebinar platform, we may still have you ask that question over the webinar so we can repeat the response for those who are listening via the broadcast and cannot see that response. So with that, I will hand it over to one of our Q&A helpers, Ray, to get us started.
All right, thank you, Julia. First question we have is from Jennifer Stanley. If you could just go ahead and unmute yourself, state your affiliation, and ask your question again.
Hi, my question was just related to, we're a small district and wondering if the state was going to supply any type of monies for us to accomplish this very big task.
Thanks so much for that comment. Unfortunately, there is not any direct funding per se. In the legislation, the legislature did not provide any specific funding. However, depending on where you're located, there are some haulers that provide internal containers. So if you want to put your contact information into the Q&A, we'll have a team member follow up with you and we'll explore more options. I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And the next question is from Gaiza Goulart. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could unmute yourself, state your affiliation, and your question was regarding education and outreach.
Yes, I work with the city of Newport Beach, and my question was answered, and I asked about if the city still needs to send education and outreach. And since I'm here, I would like also to ask, starting next year, when SB 1383 is effective, will the city be required to send AB 341 and 1826 education outreach to schools?
Thank you for that question. So yes, your obligation to continue to provide education and outreach continues to all organic waste generators. With respect to the city and how you frame the education, it doesn't necessarily have to be, okay, this is 41 and this is about 1826. So we'd be happy to, our team could do a follow-up with you and share with you some of our educational materials that you might find helpful. Also, just to let you know that we are embarking on a statewide educational campaign and we'll have toolkits available for local jurisdictions. Those educational materials will be primarily focused on educating residential generators, but some of those materials may also be useful for some of your other organic waste generators. So feel free to put your contact information in the Q&A, and we'll have a team member that's the liaison, your liaison for Newport Beach, do a follow-up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next question that we have is from Malika Sen. This question is regarding private schools classified as commercial businesses. If you could go ahead and state your affiliation, you are now unmuted on our end.
Hi, Cara. Thank you for this wonderful webinar to the whole of CalRecycle. This is Malika, and I'm with Solana Center. We are a nonprofit in San Diego. So I was specifically trying to get clarification on private schools. They are not considered LEAs, and it was answered that the jurisdiction is responsible for following up with private schools with regarding inspections and enforcements, correct? So
that is correct.
I had a follow-up, and it was to do with the Tier 2 classification. So what are the criteria for the Tier 2 classification for a private school? Is it still an LEA criteria? Is it a restaurant? And if it's a cafeteria restaurant type criteria, and they only have like 50 students at a time, but over the whole lunch period, it's over 250, is it now Tier 2? Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you for that one. So a private school is not a local education agency. So when we're looking at the Tier 2 commercial edible food generator thresholds, they would not be in that one category of local education agency with an on-site food facility. Yeah, I think that's the right term. And so we haven't found any situations where a private school would fit the other definitions in the Tier 2 categories. So again, that's how you would look at it, though, is if they fit in any of the other threshold definitions. So if you ever have any further questions, please feel free. I do want to put a plug that in the next couple weeks, we will have the guidance coming out on identifying your Tier 1 and Tier 2 commercial edible food generators. And in the middle of May, we are planning a webinar to go over that guidance. And we will be addressing private schools. That's in the guidance document. So I think you'll find the guidance very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our next question is back to Giza regarding contracts between school districts and haulers.
Yes, thank you again. This question was also answered on the audience questions, and I'm not sure if everyone is reading. Thank you for answering that. And the question was related to the school districts. They have their own contract with their trash haulers, right? So the city can't obligate the hauler to perform a certain service to the school district because it's a private contract. So my question was related to that. Like, is the city obligated to mediate and be the third person on this contract?
So you're asking a really great question, and this was addressed in the webinar. So in Article 7 of the regulations, jurisdictions must have enforceable requirements on any hauler of organic waste that's operating in the okay. So in that respect, any hauler that comes in, provides organic waste service, except for a couple of categories, those haulers are hauling construction, demolition, and a community compost site. So look in Article 7, we can do a follow-up with you if you want to talk more about specifics. In our model ordinance, we do address language in your enforceable ordinance for placing requirements on any hauler that operates. With that said, when it comes to the specific contractual agreement or agreement that the school or school district has with a hauler, it will be CalRecycle that is conducting compliance evaluations of local enforcement agencies. And so as a result, if there's an issue that we find, I don't know, any aspect of what's required in Article 5, then CalRecycle would be following up with that local education agency to address what the compliance issue is and dealing with it that way. So your question had a couple of parts to it, and I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Next question, let's go to Rick Kessler regarding funding on custodial labor. You are unmuted. Please state your affiliation and repeat your question.
Yes, I believe you answered it. I was just curious as far as funding. I think what you're doing is fantastic. I don't know if anybody's been in a school LEA environment and realized that all the financial burdens we're going through currently and in the future, just the expenses. And I hate to say that we're looking at sustainability as far as a cost, but it is a financial burden through some of these guidelines for a school district. And I was just hoping that there would be some sort of funding to help a school district.
Yeah, thank you so much for that comment. And you know, we really do understand. I mean, overall implementation of these requirements is requiring all of us to do a lot more to achieve the goals that have been set by the legislature. You know, with that said, I wanted to turn it to Curie, because what we are starting to do is put together some just models and best management practices from some of our school districts that have already implemented these programs. So one aspect of that, we will be really providing input on how they're dealing with, you know, the additional cost and staffing and being creative and making that happen. So Curie, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've actually been working with a lot of nonprofit associations and school districts to create best management practices from real world situations. And so we're constantly updating our website with those resources for local education agencies. We also do have a small web page with funding resources such as grants from CalRecycle that are available for some local education agencies.
Okay, great. That was one of my next questions as far as any grants available to us.
Yeah, and we'll continue to keep those pages updated. So if you would like to put your contact information in the Q&A, Curie can send you a link to that website information. And also, just so you know, we've been working very closely with some of the statewide associations, at California Association of School Business Officials, the purchasing officials, California, I'll get my acronym wrong, the Business Administration, California School Business Administration. So all of those statewide educational organizations. We've also been working very closely with the California Department of Education. So, you know, our goal in collaborating with those statewide organizations is to be efficient in providing information and resources to the various schools and school districts, and make sure that kind of everyone's getting the messaging and information. So please know that we are working also at that statewide level.
Okay, and the next question, we're going to go to Sarah Davis. I will unmute you if you could state your affiliation, and then your question is regarding self-hauling.
Okay, if Sarah isn't available, we can go ahead and go to El Roper, asking questions about no options for organic waste pickup. You are now unmuted. Please state your affiliation and reiterate your question.
Hi, I'm the business service manager at a school district, but we're in a very rural area, and I don't think that we have access to that type of organic waste pickup. So what would we do in that aspect? Because it's even hard for us just to get regular waste pickup.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So in the presentation, we covered that there will be areas of the state that are covered by what we call a rural exemption. And if your school and school district is located within that jurisdiction, you will also be able to request an exemption from CalRecycle to be waived from the collection requirements. Probably in the June timeframe, we will be publishing on the CalRecycle website where all of those areas are. In the meantime, if you would like to provide your contact information, we'll have one of our team members follow up with you and let you know if you are in what we call a rural exempted area. If you're not in an area that will be waived from the collection requirements, then we would love to still work with you because it might be a situation where the local jurisdiction and the infrastructure is coming online, but it's not yet online. So, you know, depending on where you're located will depend on the type of assistance we can provide. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You bet. And also in late May and June, we will be providing on our website all of the guidance for local education agencies on how they can request their waivers. The waivers can be submitted starting in September. We'll also have a webinar, and we will make sure that we get information out on that webinar to all of our local education agencies and non-local entities. So Curie and Arlene will make sure that these groups today are also informed about those webinars.
Our next question is regarding containers from Jim Empey. Please state your affiliation and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks. And you kind of addressed this once, but from a school district lens, focus. So you have an elementary school of 500 kids on a day-to-day basis. They don't produce what I would consider traditional green waste. They don't, the lawn clippings, the leaves, that sort of thing is picked up by the FMO ranks. And in our district's case, we self-transport to the local landfill that has a composting operation. So what I'm trying to dig through here is what we may not be accounting for is food waste. Now I get the edible items. Our food services department handles food that in a cafeteria setting you have and in some cases it's like the unwanted food table or the leftover table or you didn't drink this or it's still packaged. You get what I'm saying. So we have that, but what I'm trying to get through here is other food waste. The buffet example, the half-eaten apple. Are we now going to be required to collect that and then dispose of it in some way?
Curie, do you want to start?
I believe it would be dependent on the services offered by the waste hauler in your jurisdiction. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me just add to that. So local education agencies, if you generate organic waste, so in this case, we're talking about food waste, you are required to recycle that food waste. You're required to subscribe to a collection service that provides that collection service. Same thing for paper and cardboard, other types of recyclables, that has to be collected as well. If landscaping waste is being maintained and then maybe you're self-hauling it to a facility that recycles that, that would be allowed as well. So we'd be happy to set up a follow-up conversation to talk about your particular school district, where you're located, and what resources are available, if that would be helpful.
Thanks. So to be clear, a district in this scenario would need not the recycling container, not the solid waste container, not the green waste container, but another container, right?
Yeah, so to clarify that further, it's going to depend, and this I think was where Curie was going. If your collection service allows food and green waste to be commingled, then you will still have one, what we call a green container collection service. In some jurisdictions, because of the infrastructure, sometimes green waste and food waste is kept separate. But in most cases, what we're seeing is that the green waste and food waste is combined in the same container. But what we'd like to do is follow up with you, so we can help figure out what's going on in your area and your service provider.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just go ahead and provide your contact information in the Q&A. We'll have a team member follow up.
Okay, the next question is from Naomi Stern. You are now unmuted on our end. If you could ask the question regarding LEAs and the SB 1383.
Hi, this is Naomi Stern. I'm with the San Mateo County Office of Education, and I'm not sure, I asked us some questions. Let's see, I was curious to hear more about the Tier 1 food generator service, and if an LEA is contracting with a food service provider such as the company Sodexo, is Sodexo classified as a Tier 1 food generator, and they would be responsible for recycling the organic waste on their end? And then what would the school district, the LEA, be responsible for in that case?
Sure. So a local enforcement agency, that's what we also call LEAs. I keep getting confused today. A local education agency, because that's who we're talking about, LEAs today. In the definition of Tier 2, it is a local education agency that has an on-site food facility, has to start recovering food come January 1, 2024. A Tier 1 commercial edible food generator, such as a food service provider that's providing service, say to a school site, for example, they're responsible for recovering the edible food that they generate starting January 1, 2022. We will be having guidance coming out in the next couple of weeks, as well as a webinar in the middle of May on this topic. And so we'll make sure that all of our outreach for the webinars today, both for local education agencies and non-local entities, receive information about that upcoming webinar. Also, if you're signed up on our SLCP listserv, you'll get a notice as well. I think that will provide a lot of clarity, but that's how it would work for your particular situation, or the schools actually, in because you're at the County Office of Education, but in your school districts. And there's a lot going on in Santa Clara County with respect to starting to develop the edible food infrastructure, a lot of resources. So if you're not already connected with what the county is doing with respect to edible food recovery, we'd love to get you connected. And if you want to provide your contact info, we'd be happy to do that. Did that help answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
You bet.
So just to clarify, while we have you on, Naomi, I believe you asked another question regarding the violation aspect of it. If you could provide some more clarity on that.
Sure, yes, I was wondering, thank you, if you could provide just a little bit more information about how CalRecycle would become aware of violations by an LEA.
Yeah, and Naomi, Ashley just reminded me, you're San Mateo County. So same thing. There's a lot going on with San Mateo County with edible food, so we'll make sure you get connected. I apologize for that. So we have not fully developed what our process will be for conducting compliance evaluations at local education agencies. We're still working on developing that, but the way it would work is if CalRecycle decides to conduct a compliance evaluation, we would be reviewing all those requirements in Article 5. And if you are an commercial edible food generator, a Tier 2 generator, we would be looking at what's required under that article as well. We would conduct a site inspection to review your program implementation. If there's an issue or a gap in compliance, we would be informing the school district or school, depends on how things are run there, about the issue to provide time for correcting that. And then if needed, we would continue on the enforcement process as was described in the webinar. Did that help answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that could happen is if CalRecycle is informed via the complaint process, then we would conduct a further evaluation and follow up on that complaint as well.
Next question is regarding edible food recovery and training. This is from Tammy Stolzenholler. If you could unmute yourself and state your affiliation.
Tammy. I work with the city of Watsonville. And yes, we're a small city on the Central Coast. We have 17 schools in our area. So it's a more of a small city setup. But I'm thinking ahead. My question is about working with the food redistributing agencies. So I'm wondering, I would think for them, this is a big gear up that they have to do. So I'm wondering who is responsible for informing the food service redistributors about this new mandate so that they can gear up to accept this huge, massive new wave of food redistribution in the communities. Is that us as a city? Is that the state? Because I have a feeling these organizations have no idea this is coming.
Sure, it's a little bit of both. And I'm going to ask if Martine or Kyle wants to jump in to talk about this question.
Sure, thanks so much for the question. So they are aware. We've worked very closely during the development of these regulations with the California Association of Food Banks, many of their feeding agencies. We also have our Food Waste Prevention and Rescue Grant Program. Santa Cruz County Food Bank has been funded, and also Monterey County Food Bank has been funded. So they are aware of this, and also their agencies that are doing a lot of the rescues and potentially some of these rescues from K through 12 schools in their area are aware of SB 1383. And we've held webinars just like this for the food bank members and their agencies as well. So that education continues as we move forward into implementation. But I did just want to make sure that you are generally aware that the outreach has been robust and that they really were absolutely critical in the development of the regulations themselves and the policies that are included.
Yeah, and Martine, just to add to that, jurisdictions have a responsibility to be collaborating with food recovery organizations and services, particularly as it relates to planning for capacity. Martine, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that pretty much covers it. I think the only thing that I would add is really, providing that education and outreach. Jurisdictions will be providing education and outreach to local education agencies. And as part of that education and outreach, they'll be providing a list of food recovery organizations and services that you could potentially contract with or establish a written agreement with to comply with 1383. And so in order for the jurisdiction to know which organizations and services to include on that list, they're going to need to be doing some outreach and some investigating into which organizations want to participate in SB 1383 and making sure that those organizations are aware of what's coming.
Okay, next up we have a question from Casey Bartholomew regarding the edible food recovery record keeping requirements at various food service providers. You are now unmuted, Casey.
Hi, Casey Bartholomew from Stop Waste. I think you answered my question in the chat, and several others have asked a similar question. It was really around a scenario where in Alameda County, we have a number of public school districts that have Sodexo or other food service providers. So there's the edible food recovery or donation requirements, and it sounds like that food service provider operating at that specific school site needs to donate the maximum amount of food generated, if I'm correct on that. And then secondly, the record, I think the question was around record keeping. In terms of the contact information for food recovery agreements, is that held at the school site? Is it held at the food service provider central office? Is it held at the school district in that scenario?
Thanks, Casey, for your question. Martine, did you want to start?
Sorry, just turning my camera on. Hi, Casey. It's great to hear from you and looking forward to this Friday. I'm presenting to Stop Waste this Friday. So just saying, I'm excited for that. Yeah, so I think what's important when it comes to the food service provider operating at a local education agency is that we remember, and we've talked about this, that as of January 1st, 2021, the food service provider is responsible for compliance with the commercial edible food generator requirements.
2022, Martine.
I'm so sorry. That's the second time I've said that today. 2022. I quit drinking coffee, so that's impacted me significantly. Thank you, Kara. And then 2 years later, if that local education agency has an on-site food facility, they're also responsible for compliance. But if you're contracting with that food service provider and they already have those records and have that program in place, then you could be using those records. But the records do need to be, or at least a copy of them, maintained on-site. Because if someone comes to do an inspection, those records need to be available for the person that's doing the inspection to make sure that the site is in compliance. Did that answer the question, Casey?
Yes, so basically if we were doing inspections of food service providers, we would be inspecting the food service provider at that school site and looking for the records at that school site in terms of food donation agreements, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Kara, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Casey, yeah, just to be clear. So yeah, when doing inspections come January 2024, right, then you would, if you were doing an inspection of a local education agency, they need to have their records on site. They might be getting those records, say from their food service provider or another entity, but they have to have those records on site.
What about the food service provider in 2022? Where does the inspection take place?
The inspection will take place at their location. So wherever that food service provider is located. So in some cases, we have food service providers that may come into your county, but are not actually located in your county. So they might come in, provide food, and then, you know, head back out. So it would be the jurisdiction in which that food service provider is located would be conducting that inspection and determining that the food service provider is meeting its requirements under the regulation.
Okay. And so if they're out of our county, we're essentially not inspecting them.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we are over time just by a minute. There's a lot of great other questions though that we did not get to today. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull a report with these questions. We will be following up with you guys. So rest assured we will get back to you. If you don't hear back to us from us in a timely manner, feel free to contact me or the SLCP inbox and we will get your response as soon as possible. Again, this PowerPoint will, with the talking points, will be posted online. So please sign up for the SLCP listserv. We don't have an estimate on when we're going to post it yet. It needs to be made ADA compliant. But once we do post, again, sign up for the SLCP listserv. I'm sure Curie will send it out through the schools listserv as well. So again, sign up for that. If you have any other questions, please email your local assistance and market development representative, the SLCP inbox, or you could email me or Kara Morgan. I know she wanted a couple of you guys to email her directly. So thank you guys for a great webinar, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.